This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
From Erie to Philadelphia, from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. Hi, I'm Charlie Greenwald. I'm Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Maura Donnelly. Maura, welcome back.
Hello, Charlie.
Why, what looks new to you for the fall in Harrisburg?
Oh.
Anything in particular?
Well, it's election time, so that's going to be exciting and interesting, I think.
And it's back to school time.
It is back to school
It's back
time.
to school, back for the secondary students and the primary students and, of course, our college students. And, of course, one of the topics that we've followed closely over the years is higher education and higher education in Pennsylvania. And today we're very lucky to have one of the best people in Pennsylvania to talk about that subject, and that's Ken Mash. Ken is the newly elected president of APSCUF, of course, the association of all the faculty, professors in our 14 state universities, and the successor to Steve Hicks, a frequent guest on our show previously. Ken, you've been here as vice president of APSCUF. This is your first time as president of APSCUF. Welcome to the show.
It is my first time here, and it's great to be back. It's always a pleasure, Charlie, to be here.
How's it going so far?
It's going great. We are, engaged at the beginning of the semester. It's always an exciting time for faculty and for coaches. A chance to meet their new students, a chance to really, get in the spirit of the entire academic year. Moving forward, and teaching is what we love to do, and working with students is what we love to do the most.
Okay, well, I want to get back to the academic side of things for you, but let's talk about something that your organization did recently, and that was to endorse Tom Wolf for governor. And so can you tell us a little bit about the process involved in making that decision? I think you're out front in terms of statewide organizations getting that endorsement out there. And so you tell us what your internal process is for making that decision and what that means for Tom Wolf.
Sure. Well, actually, our organization has an affiliated organization, which is our Political Action Committee. And that Political Action Committee is made up of representatives from the 14 different universities. And we engage in a pretty rough process of vetting and learning about the various different candidates for governor. Then we had the opportunity to meet with a couple of the candidates. Tom Wolf came and he had a discussion. We had 14 faculty members there, virtually all with PhDs at the time. And it was very exciting for us because when Tom came in to meet with us, it was clear that despite the fact that we had 14 PhDs in the room, that Tom was perhaps the smartest person in the room. And the responses that he gave to our questions were thoughtful. I wouldn't call them necessarily political in the typical sense of just telling us what we wanted to hear, but he had meaningful explanations for everything. And we know that the Commonwealth will benefit, too, because he's got a PhD in economics from MIT. He can articulate things. But more important than that even, he showed a willingness to invite lots of different people to the table to talk about how are we going to solve the very real problems that the Commonwealth faces.
One of the things that we had talked about with Steve in one of his last appearances here was this whole notion that was being discussed at some of the statewide systems, such as Westchester and Shippensburg. That's the whole notion of secession, that perhaps the universities would leave the state system and go out and become semi-public or private institutions. Could you tell us what's new with that whole idea and that movement? Has that continued, or is that abated for the time being, Ken?
Yeah, I think, what was happening there is we're facing in the system, and I hope we get to talk about this a little bit more, a real decline in resources. So when you get to the very root of things, it was about, how it is that we are divvying up our resources at the universities. And from everything that we understand at this point, that even the sponsors of the bill, when they looked at all the implications and the rest, they pulled back. They're focusing now more on some very specific concerns that they have. And I think that we're all together now really focused on how do we restore money back to the state system. I'm sure you're aware of 2011, we took a $90 million cut, 18%, Since that time, we have been flat funded. If we adjust that for inflation, that's about a $23 million cut is what it translates into for the state system schools. So this year, in doing their budgeting, the state system estimates that even with a 3% tuition increase, which there was this year, that there's still a $30 million gap that the universities have to face. Well, we face those cuts year after year after year. And now we've hit the point where, you know, people say, cut the waste, cut the waste. There's no waste. What we're doing right now is we are cutting out programs that are core, key programs, the kind of programs that we would expect be offered at universities. We're seeing philosophy professors being cut. We're seeing music being cut.
I loved philosophy.
You know, well, you know.
And I love music.
I love classes.
It's hard to imagine, but at one of our universities right now, they're not going to offer music as an introductory class even. So students won't get the opportunity to get exposed to Beethoven, to Bach, to Mozart. Those giants of Western culture, it's not going to be there. We've seen since those cuts, 77 programs put into moratorium. A third of those programs are foreign language programs. And that is really just not healthy for our students. It's not healthy for the Commonwealth either. You know, in terms of the individual students, we're actually seeing nationwide a growth, a demand for interpreters, a demand for translators. But even more important than that, everybody from the chancellor of the state system to the university presidents to faculty, we all know we live in a globalized economy now. So if we're not giving students foreign language programs, we're hurting those students and their opportunities. On top of that, we're hurting the Commonwealth because we're not going to be an attractive place for employers to come to go search. Yeah.
No, well, one last question on the whole Westchester wanting to leave. Can they do that without legislation, or will they need some sort of legislative help to do that?
Yeah, I don't think that they're actually looking to leave any longer.
Okay, that's good news.
Yeah, and when we say they, you know, really it was their foundation that was looking at doing that. We had a couple of legislators who really love Westchester University and the students who go there, and they were looking at, you know, ways to make those student lives better.
Yeah.
And I think when we got right down to the details of what that would mean for Westchester students and what it would mean for the rest of the students in the state system, even those legislators had to say, hey, there's a lot more to this than up front. That it looks like. So I'm not sure that that's the direction that really anybody's focused on. We're looking at ways that we can improve the state system. I know that they are looking at ways that they can improve the state system. And of course, as I said, we're all focused on, is the Commonwealth going to live up to its promise of providing an affordable public higher education for students?
Well, in your answer to the question about secession, the possibility of secession, you touched on something that Steve would touch on several times in appearances in the past, and that is this whole notion of treating universities like a business. And whereas I certainly understand that we don't want to have universities that are hemorrhaging cash, on the other hand, universities aren't a business, I would say. That universities are there to help train our children for their careers, for life, and it's there to perpetuate civilization and to transmit knowledge to future generations. And that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a strict profit bottom line. I don't know how you would respond to that or what APSCUF's position is on that. But I'm not here saying we should hemorrhage cash. But on the other hand, what is this? Do you, in your position, have to deal with this notion that the university is a business and we need to treat it strictly as a business?
Well, that business mentality, and you're absolutely right, Charlie, and Steve did talk about that a lot, and he is absolutely right, and we confront that business mentality constantly. I mean, we have to start to think about why does that business mentality come about, or how does it come about? And the reason it comes about, I think, is once we have the cut in the state system, and the state has not lived up to its sort of obligation to fund properly these institutions. And what happened then is we have a real transfer of the cost of college to students, right? So in the 1980s, in 1983, for example, the Commonwealth picked up 65% of the cost. Only 35% of the cost of the education at our universities was paid for by the student. Now, the Commonwealth only picks up 25% of that. 75% of that is picked up by the student. So you're shifting the burden of the cost to the student, and in a way, that means that, in fact, you're making the student into a consumer by doing that. They're the ones that are paying for that, and they are seriously paying for it. We're talking about, Pennsylvania is 47 out of 50 states as far as funding public higher education. This is a policy that has come about from the Commonwealth to do this. But, if you're going to leave the university, and the average student who attends our universities has $27,000 of debt when they leave our universities, it's it makes sense that if we need to attract students. So that mentality of acting like a business is treat the student like they're a consumer. Give them what they want. But that is a very, very dangerous thing. Students aren't there to buy a product. Students don't come to our universities necessarily knowing what they want to do or what it is that they're trying to achieve. Some students do know what they want to achieve, but they're really not sure what the best path is to get there. So it may not occur to students that, knowing something about music, right? And we have a university that's not going to be offering music. Knowing something about music makes you a more conversant individual. And when you go on the job market, you ought to be able to speak to people about subjects that they would expect you to know if you're an educated person. They may think, oh, I struggled with foreign language when I was in high school. I don't want to take a foreign language. But it's the duty of the university, in part, to educate that student to say, look, taking a foreign language is going to help you in your career. And when we listen to what employers are saying, employers say consistently in survey after survey, despite all the other things that you might hear, they say they want students with essentially a liberal arts background. Not that we have excellent professional programs, they're great, but they want students who can think critically, who have a broad-based knowledge, who can communicate with people. That's what they're looking for. But it's not necessarily, I have now 2 kids in college, a third one that's going to be in college. I understand the mentality of kids when they're going to college. They want to come out, they want to make some money, they think they have an idea of what that is to do. But what appears to be the thing to do isn't always the right thing to do.
And it can change.
Right. Yeah. And that's part of our job is, when we're at the universities, is to educate them. And that's not the mentality of consumerism. Playing to what 17-year-olds think they want is not necessarily the best way to go.
Well, you mentioned, just in passing, something about a drop in applicants to the state system. Is that the case? Do you have any sense of why?
Yeah, well, in 2008, we were at an all-time high. We had 120,000 students at our universities. This year we have last year we had 112,000. We're expecting, or the state system's expecting, that it will fall by about 800. There's a very simple reason for this. Everybody could see that it was coming, and the reason is demographics. In other words, how many students do we have attending schools in the high schools that are going to be graduating? Oh. And those numbers were plotted out. It's not because the state system schools are doing anything wrong that they're not doing that. It is because
There's
simply
fewer kids
there
to
are
go.
fewer kids to go to. And given the fact that 90% of the students who attend our universities are Pennsylvanians, when there's a hit in the demographics in Pennsylvania, there's going to be a hit to our enrollments.
Yeah.
The good news is it looks like, and if we look at those enrollment trends, that there's going to be an increase in students attending K through 12, which should translate into a growth at our universities. More
babies growing up. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
More demand for us, and we love what we do. We love Pennsylvania, and we're very fortunate because our students, 80% of them stay in Pennsylvania. So when we're talking about things like, we need to educate our students, to be prepared for the workforce, we need to think as a group, as society, what kind of society we want to live in. When we're talking about funding for the universities and student debt and things like that, it's important because our students stay here. They're going to shape the economy. If they're leaving the university with $27,000 of debt, if you imagine a couple who's together, right? That's $54,000 in debt that they're leaving with. Are you going to buy a house? Well, if you're starting off with $54,000 in debt, you may not even buy a car. Think of what that does to Pennsylvania's economy in the end when we don't have people buying houses, we don't have people buying cars. All that money's going into that debt. And, the students who attend our universities today, they're entitled to the same type of education, the same quality of education, the same kind of affordable education as the generations that preceded them.
Okay, well, we're out of time, unfortunately, and we've just opened the lid on many very important topics here. Ken, you have to come back.
Oh,
you have to come back because there's so much more that we have here to talk with you about. So good luck in your new position, and we hope to have you back very, very soon. We'll be back with the second segment of Behind the Headlines right after this. Stay with us.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, helping hospitals provide healing, health, and hope to communities across the state. And by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a Commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions to make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Express, transporting construction, farm, and industrial equipment throughout the United States, and by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment, Maura and I are going to continue in a way to talk about education. We were looking at higher education in the earlier segment, and in this segment we want to talk to and welcome back Bob Latham. Bob, you are the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. And hi, welcome back. It's so nice to see you again.
Good to be here.
But in your capacity of being in charge of much of the construction that goes on our roads, your group has a great influence on safety for our primary and secondary students as they go back to school. And we look for safe roads for our school buses to go on. What has been, since you were on last, what progress have we made in terms of improving the safety of Pennsylvania roads with the new school year in the offing?
Well, Charlie, we've had an opportunity since the passage of Act 89, or what we call the Comprehensive Transportation Funding Bill last year, to talk about some of the benefits that we could see coming up. And one of the things I want to point out, that bipartisan solution that was agreed to and of course signed by Governor Corbett. Governor Corbett used to point out during the debate over the bill that 1.5 million children ride school buses every day in the Commonwealth, and so they need safe bridges, safe roads to get those buses to schools. And also, when we had a number of the bridges that were closed down or posted for weight and weight restricted, those buses had to take circuitous routes. Well, the longer that they're out there, particularly in some of the rural communities, that's a safety issue. So I'm happy to say that that we're able to attack that issue and solve that issue now in two ways. One is by rehabilitating those bridges so the buses have the shortest route between the homes and school, number one. And number two, doing safety improvements interchanges, fixing lanes, turning lanes, things like that. Little small improvements like that can really add up in the safety area. And then I guess I'll throw out one more thing that is relevant to schools and our primary education, and that is the ability in our multimodal fund, which was created by the Act 89, a new fund that will help bike paths, bike facilities, and also pedestrian facilities. So in some cases, we're going to be able to create safe walking routes to schools for children, which is also good for their health.
I think it's important to point out that probably not all of the changes have been made so far.
Oh, no,
correct?
We're not finished yet. But
I just want to make sure there's not a mom out there watching who's saying, wait a minute.
Yeah, wait a minute, where is all this?
My kid still has a circuitous route to school.
You got that right.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, a couple of things that happened last year was, of course, we had a very severe winter. So we are focusing a lot this year on paving and paving projects to fix those roads that were really beat up badly by the winter. Not just at the state level, but also local governments, and we tend to think about transportation. We think about roads as PennDOT. It's all PennDOT. Well, they maintain about 40,000 miles. The local government's about 70,000 miles. So a lot of that work that's going on in your community and in our communities, in and around the schools, and so that those roads are safer.
As our good friend,
better marking.
As our good friend Dave Sanko reminds us frequently.
Absolutely, and he's absolutely correct. And where would they be without the additional $37 million that Act 89 has provided to the local governments in order to do that? So we've gotten a good start on the paving season. We're working on bridges now as well, and then we have some of these more major projects in the pipeline. In addition to just the regular work that's going on, also PennDOT and its partners like our private companies that do the work, engineering firms and construction firms that employ thousands of people around the state, work with the department on modernization, cost effectiveness. So we're always looking at new techniques and new processes that can either make roads last long and bridges last longer, or be safer. One example of this is an initiative out of the Federal Highway Administration's Everyday Counts program. It's called high friction surface treatment. So those curves that and other areas that have had a high accident rate because of the nature of the road, they have a treatment now that we put down on top of that, which will make it more skid resistant and help with traction and obviously save lives in the process. So we're pleased at some of the things that we're doing in that regard as well.
I have to say that I was really prepared for a lot of stopping and waiting during construction this past summer, and there were some, but and I told myself, it's for the kids, so their rides are better, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. So it seems to be really spread out. Are they trying not to annoy the general public, or is there is there a plan there, or is they just, how are they prioritizing what they're doing?
Well, again, we're just like I said, the department's regional or district offices, they have to account for where are these projects, where are the backups, how do we schedule this work. You can't close 5 bridges down and create a 50-mile detour. So we have to plan all that stuff.
So we are taken into consideration.
Absolutely.
Is what you're saying.
Well,
that's good to hear.
The public is the customer.
Yeah.
The public is the customer. We want them to understand that you can't just drop it in out of the sky. There has to be a little bit of inconvenience here or there. But the other thing we're looking at is how can we keep traffic flow through these work zones and keep them safe at the same time? So, the idea of just automatically stopping traffic or doing things that we might have done in the past has kind of gone out, again, with some of these initiatives to keep things underway. And you'll notice, for example, on the high traffic areas like the Turnpike, Pennsylvania Turnpike and other interstate highways, we keep a 55 mile an hour now through the work zones as opposed to a 45 mile an hour, and that really it seems like if you have the one person that slows down, then you get this whole accordion backup, and that's not necessarily safe for the workers or for motorists. You don't want a queue going into a construction
Well, especially with trucks coming up behind you. I think, you know, the ability to slow down to 45 for them is probably harder than it would be for us.
Yes, yeah.
So.
Well, in terms of school bus safety, too, and the safety of the roads, goodness, it seems, Bob, too, in our day and age, we transport a greater percentage of our children by school bus than we used to. I know that there are lots of children in our area that they used to walk to school, and now they're all picked up by a school bus. If I don't know if each school district has different rules regarding
well, I think
school bus transportation versus walking, or if the state has rules on that, I'm not certain.
I'm not certain who determines that either, but you're right. I mean, and look at the phenomenon as you've had communities grow out into what were basically farms before. Now you have whole communities out there, and the children have to be transported to a campus setting, which is the way some major school districts are.
A lot of consolidation of schools because of funding. And,
and that is one of the considerations of, again, that we're going to be able to do is make those, you know, what were rural, very lowly traveled roads into better, safer surfaces for the population out there, and of course the school buses as they go over them. And then as we talk, one bridge that gets posted or weight restricted can really cause havoc there. So we're pleased that Act 89 will have a very positive benefit on people being able to get in and around their communities. Have a better quality of life, and then, of course, make it safer to get to and from school for children.
Where can our moms and dads go for additional information on the highway projects?
Well, we have a website, www.pahighwayinfo.org.
Could you repeat that?
www.pahighwayinfo.org. Okay. That's sort of our policy website. And what we do is we do a lot of links with some of the government agencies and other pertinent information, news stories, etc. So, as a matter of fact, you'll probably see a link to this show after it airs. We do things like that, and then all of the 12-year projects that are on the state's website now, and all the information on projects that are coming out will be on that website as well.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us today, Bob, and catching us up a little bit on at school time. And we look forward to talking with you in the future on other subjects as well. Mara and I will be back with you next week with another new show on Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.